Yes. So our frustration with our elected officials and with the mainstream media that have effectively pulled us further and further and further to the right. So far to the right that it has led to very bad policy decisions, very bad budget appropriation decisions, the unbelievable expansion of the border industrial complex, which has created a deterrence to detention, to deportation pipeline, the hue and cry about the broken immigration system that just can't seem to be fixed. Why? Because it works just fine for the demagogues and profiteers who benefit from it. And so where are we now? Rising fascism that has a gulag and a Gestapo that they are now looking at expanding by degrees through a budget appropriation that could go as somewhere between 175 billion and 345 billion. That's all being tied into the reconciliation plan in the Senate. So we're living in the upside down. We don't have to tell you that. We're living in the upside down, but it is time that we resist, we refuse, and we reclaim the narrative. And what better way to do that than with our language? So we thought we would, focus on today on this on our the use of language and how it has enabled that right word shift so that we can try to tug it back, starting with us and then expanding that out into the communities and people that we touch. So I'm going to turn on my screen here and we'll talk about our agenda where we struggled a bit with how to name this event because it started out with fighting back and that sounded a little too militant. I'm sorry, my mouse has disappeared, so I want to do that. There we go. And then I can turn that on. So we decided to call it Shifting the Paradigm, Finding the Words to Touch Hearts and Change Minds. And our agenda is our welcome. We've done that. Dora and I are going to each speak to you about why we felt we could, we have a unique perspective on this issue. I'll do a brief presentation on sort of setting up frameworks for discussion that include the power of words, the purpose of slogans, the weakness of positions, and the dual opportunity of narrative, which is unfortunately too often missed by the media and even by the movement. And then we'll look at some examples. Dora and I each have some examples of how we've, you know, attempted to push back in the service of changing hearts and minds. And then we want to turn it over to all of you all to either bring your examples of success or times when you felt that you could have been more successful. And then, assuming we have time, I want to introduce you to a messaging framework that I learned from a guru, in my opinion, named Anat Shenker Osorio, who really, really helped me with my own evolution as a writer in creating human-centered language and a human-centered narrative. So that's our agenda. I hope that sounds okay to everyone. And before we get going, how about Dora, do you want me to start with the unique perspective piece, or would you like to? You
Go ahead.
there?
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go and then I'll pass it to you and then we'll dive in. So I am the author of this book, but I wasn't always an author. I started out my career as a linguist, as an English language and English literacy educator. which is what propelled me.
Come, it's
Can
at
you, whoever that
being
is, can you,
cooked.
Gail, can you please mute? That propelled me on a journey around the world. I get to call myself an expat because of my white skin and blue passport, but I'm basically an economic migrant, just one that finds it easier to cross borders than most. And in my life out here in the borderlands, the ephemeral borderlands, I moved from just teaching language to becoming a conflict resolution educator and a conflict resolution mediator and cross-cultural communications coach. And then when I began the process of writing my book, I had to really question my own language. I discovered sometimes through hard ways that my own language wasn't always human-centered, and it often perpetuated some of the stereotypes and tropes that we'll be talking about today. So that was an interesting experience to be on the other side of it, being re-educated about though I have an understanding of the power of words, being re-educated through my writing about how I was myself slipping up and falling into the old linguistic patterns that can be harmful. So I'd love to be able to talk about that as well. So that's my unique perspective on this issue, and now I'll turn it over to Dora.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I believe that for me it's more of on the ground, and it's been my experience as a migrant myself, someone who migrated a long time ago, and I will always be this person who came and seek safety. So it has been also for me a journey to learn how to teach others how to call me or how to call my friends they are coming now, because very often people forget that we are people first, and then you say whatever you want to say. And what I understand and what I have learned is that doing this work, a humanitarian work here in the ground in our borderlands and across the country, when talking to people, it's very hard to people to refer to us as a person, as a Dora. I become the migrant, the illegal, I become the rapist, I become all these narratives that people put together to dehumanize me and to, because as we all know with that language, if you dehumanize and put us in boxes, it's easier to criminalize us. It is easier to see us less than a person. So I've always tell people, look at me, I'm not an alien that I know. I don't bleed green or blue. I bleed red. It's just like you. So so that is very important for us. And you know, for those of you that know that we had a resource center in a Mexican side in the it's very small town of Sasabe, Sonora. Even with the people, the beautiful people from that community that we loved, had it to be taught how to call our families, our friends that were coming to our center, because for that community, they were nothing but wetbacks. And it was like ouch. So you know, it was a moment of teaching, a moment of being an example for someone that's maybe sometimes they don't know better, but so yeah, this is important for us to remember. Yeah.
Great, really great jumping off point, because you've basically led us right to the words. And the key point that I want to make here from my wearing my linguistic hat is that words influence thought. So you know, we're all in the world of migration rights, immigrant rights, and the right to migrate. But what does alien? You can put it in the chat or just unmute and popcorn style shout it out. What does the word alien connote? Anybody?
Not human.
Right. Not human.
The enemy?
An enemy. Exactly. Anybody
A
else?
stranger. Strange.
A stranger and a stranger to be feared.
Illegal.
Illegal. So when we begin by calling somebody alien, they're dehumanized. They're no longer a human.
Welcome to the U.S. Cellular voicemail 2074
Amy, can you
0214 is not available. Please leave your message after the tone.
I think that's you, Amy.
After you have finished your message, just hang up. Or to hear more options, please press 1.
Hi. Okay, great. So alien connotes all these strange and scary things, but we're talking about human beings. We're talking about people, persons. We're talking about mothers and fathers and grandparents and children and youth and high school students, maybe a debate champion, maybe a varsity basketball player, an engineer, a lawyer, a barber, a musician. So my prescription number one, easy peasy, is because words influence thought, always call it what it is. Always call him or her what he or she is, what they are. Always center humanity first. Another example is illegals. What does that connote? It connotes criminality. It connotes danger, right? But crossing the line without inspection is a misdemeanor. It's not even a felonious crime. It's certainly not a violent crime. And many people have to because they have no other choice. So we're talking about people who don't have documents, residents who are living among us without documents, people without immigration status, which is not their fault. It's the government's fault, right? We're talking non-citizen residents, a mother of US citizen children who maybe has not yet been afforded a path to citizenship, a husband of a US citizen spouse for 18 years who still has not been able to naturalize for no fault of their own. Maybe he's an engineer married to a US citizen and a father of 3 US citizen children aged 17, 14, 10. It gives you a sense of how long he's been here married to his US citizen spouse. So we're always in my writing, and I urge you to as well, to get away from the labels and bring a sense of who you're talking about to the narrative always. So we're always talking about our family members, our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends, the people living among us, worshiping with us, alongside us, who for no fault of their own are still not residents. Arrest is another one. Arrest. Arrest connotes somebody who's committed a crime and has been pulled off the streets by, always passive voice, by some law enforcement entity. Maybe ICE, maybe local police, maybe a DEA agent. But in the case, for example, of our most recent horror of folks who've been sent to El Salvador for life who have committed no crime that anybody has been able to prove, we're talking about abduction, not arrest. People pulled off the street or pulled from an ICE check-in into prison. We're talking about kidnapping. And I was very, very happy that Senator Van Hollen, when he was doing his press conference in El Salvador, used these words. Abrego Garcia was kidnapped. He was abducted. By whom? The US government. He was forcibly disappeared. He was separated from his family. He was denied due process These are the words that we should be using. And detention, same thing. Now you and all of us, many of us anyway, I'm assuming all of us know the conditions inside ICE detention facilities, but those of our friends and neighbors who don't, they think detention, it sounds like 3 square meals. It sounds like maybe there's access to a ping pong table to pass the time or some movies, a library of books. It's prison. You can't come out. It's imprisonment. It's incarceration, confinement, all of people who have not been charged with a violent crime. It's a concentration camp. I've been to a fair few, and they are just encased in coils and coils and coils and coils of razor wire, and they have no man's lands. The double fencing. So if you manage to get over one, you can't get over the next one, much like the Berlin Wall. They are very often black sites where people can't get in touch with their family and their lawyer unless they can pay into an extortionist phone app. They are for-profit enslavement. So we need to call them for what they are. Deportation is another one. Deportation, okay, right. Somebody's being flown back home, but always in chains, and they can't come back. So it's expulsion, it's banishment, it's return to harm, or refoulement, if whomever you're speaking to knows what that term means, which is an international crime. In the case of our friends who've been sent to El Salvador, it's rendition. It's rendition to a black site, a concentration camp, a torture camp. It's rendition for profit, which kind of sounds like a parallel to what happened in the era of enslavement when, bounty hunters, human hunters, went to Africa and corralled people and threw them in chains and forced them onto a ship. We're doing the same thing, rounding people up, forcing them into chains, sending them to El Salvador for profit, paying Nayib Bukele to enslave people who we have come to understand, largely committed no crimes. So it is state-sponsored human trafficking. It is forced disappearance. These are all international crimes. Law enforcement, ICE, they have their detainers or their detainees. Well, it's a Gestapo. They have a gulag. These are prisoners. They can be considered inmates. These are the words that we should be using. And then we get to something that seems rather innocuous, right? Like asylum seeker and migrant. Now, sometimes you can't help but use these words, right? But in my view, even these words are one step away from the human, right? They begin the process of dehumanization. It might be the asylum seeker or the asylum seekers. They're faceless. They're not given the human value that they deserve. They seem innocuous, but from migrant, you go to illegal, you go to alien, you go to invader, right? The process of dehumanization begins. So how do we fix that? We fix that by speaking about the person seeking asylum, the person seeking safety. I use seeking safety because a lot of people don't understand what asylum is. So asylum is seeking safety, right? It might be a family who are persecuted because of the community to which they belong in a particular place, who are seeking safety. Give them their humanity always. It could be a youth fleeing the threat of gang recruitment in Honduras, let's just say, en route to reunite in safety with a family member, as opposed to a unaccompanied alien child, right? You see the difference? These words carry a feeling, an immediate feeling that you feel in the heart. It could be a mother of 3 threatened with death for her work as a human rights defender in search for her human right to freedom and a dignified life. Now, there's the definition of asylum seeker in that description, but for somebody who doesn't know what asylum is, they might not necessarily know that. So we've both given her humanity, her profession, her values, but we've also described the right to asylum. Again, a journalist targeted by a mining company in need of protection and freedom from harm. A family from, say, Mexico forced to flee, or Syria forced to flee bombing. Guatemala forced to flee drought conditions. A Mexican family displaced by a corporation that moved in and took their land. So always give the human, put the human in the words is my prescription number one. Bertrand Russell, on how fascism starts, said, first they fascinate the fools, then they muzzle the intelligent. And this is what is happening right now. They've been working very hard to fascinate the fools, and now they are muzzling the intelligent. And as a result, we live in the upside down, where language and the perpetuation of that language has somehow tied asylum up with illegality. Well, asylum is never illegal. It's a human right. So we have to call these things out. Also in the upside down, migration and security have become intertwined, such that northward migration is seen as a national security threat, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Migration does not equal insecurity. These are things, these are language knots that we need to untie for our friends and neighbors who are living in the upside down. Now we move on to the purpose of slogans. So first, we're at the word level, and the need to call things out for what they are and use language that humanizes. But there's also this much higher power, the slogan, the age-old playbook of authoritarians and dictators going back till the beginning of time. And they have a purpose. They are used to confuse, to manufacture crises that don't exist, to distract us from the real problems facing society, or the fact that, our eggs don't get any cheaper. They are used to create boogeymen that can be scapegoated, that we learn to fear and even hate. And they're used to whip up the phenomenon of the moral panic. Now, moral panics have been used to justify a multitude of sins. I don't have to tell you all what they are. Here are just some of them. And we've lived through quite a few of these in our own lifetimes, if you're as old as I am. And they're back, right? So we need to avoid slogans. Now, here are some of the common slogans that we hear all the time in certainly Fox News, but certainly by the president. And now they're being perpetuated. Just the other day, I was watching an NPR interview with a horribly hawkish, conservative, and he was supposed to be the side of the left. The opposition voice, in the spirit of otherism, was a Southern Poverty Law Center hate group. It just shows you just how far right we've been pulled. But all of these are just slogans. They're criminals and perverts and rapists and gangbangers, the worst of the worst, coming for our wives and our daughters, our jobs. They're bringing drugs. It's an invasion. They're freeloaders. Now, I'm sure I don't have to convince you that these are untruths. Send them back is a terrible one, especially when you're talking about gangs, considering the gangs began in LA and were deported. Hello, my doggy's here, so you might hear him. He gets very loud sometimes. But the reason that slogans work, and this is something that Donald Trump understands very, very well because he is a master marketer, is because of the phenomenon of repetition. So what psychologists have studied and understand, and what marketers know all too well, and you'll hear this at a Donald Trump rally, you'll hear this on Fox News, is that the average brain only needs to hear a slogan like, "There's no more room," or "They're bringing drugs," on average 13, 14, 15 times before they believe it as gospel and don't look into it critically. So that's why slogans are used. They're very, very powerful. You only have to repeat them 15 times, for example, and somebody will believe them as if it's a fact. So prescription number 2, and this is one of the problems I find with the mainstream media, never repeat the slogan. Just don't repeat it, or the tribe, or the trope, or the stereotype, because it reinforces the disinformation, which are the lies, the deliberate lies, and turns disinformation into misinformation that people around the country just believe as gospel. So we have to be careful never to repeat the slogans. Prescription number 3 is to respond to slogans, but not with facts, not with rationality, not with logic, at least not at first, because people living in the upside down are already irrational and illogical and don't care about the facts. They have their own facts. But if we start with values, we begin to hopefully touch hearts and change minds. Now, this might not be true for folks who are members of the MAGA cult, but there are a lot of people in the middle who really can be persuaded. And if we start with values that we share, that's where we can start to change hearts, touch hearts, and change minds. That is because slogans create positions that create conflicts or arguments that are very, very hard to win. So, but positions are weak because they're built on these slogans. So one example that I come up all the time, almost, I've done about 80 events now since my book came out, and almost every event, somebody will be like, oh, you must be one of those open borders people, right? Or they'll say, wait, I got something to say. A nation without a border is not a nation. All right, so I could attack that and be like, yeah, I'm for open borders, why not? But those are positional arguments that are rarely won. So what we're talking about here is that narrative gives us 2 opportunities. One opportunity is to remain locked in positions. Yes, open borders, no open borders, yes, open borders, no open borders, and shout at each other and try to persuade with facts. But that's a fast track to loss, and you don't touch a heart or change a mind. But if instead you look for the value propositions beneath those positions, offering a new paradigm based on a value, providing a point of view, and always centering the human experience, then we have the opportunity to at least plant a seed, if not in that moment change a mind. So I like to think of it as a diamond, a multifaceted diamond, and each facet sort of catches the light a little bit differently and sends it in a different direction. And the person is talking to me about open borders, Biden's open borders, which was always a lie, and is so locked into that position that I'm not going to be able to change their mind by holding the diamond exactly where it is. So I turn the diamond and I look for a different way of talking about open borders. Now, this one, I have to say, I've been dealing with this particular positional argument a lot. So I've had a lot of practice with it. And so I have now some successful responses, but this is just one. I'm not saying that I'm perfect with every one, but this is one that I found some success with. So I'm going to give you my response, but before I do, it's also important to avoid you messages, because as soon as you start saying you this, you that, the person on the other side can feel your talk to them as judgment. It puts them on the defensive. It makes them feel attacked. So always better to kind of start with the I or the we, and maybe even tell a story from your own point of view. So given this example, the same example, open borders versus closed borders, you must be an open borders person. a nation without a border is not a nation. Here's an example of how I might respond. Oh, perhaps I'm an open borders person. I'm not so sure, but what I do know is, I do wonder is, do they have to be so cruel? I mean, I don't want to be associated with the kind of cruelty that our borders have created. It is against my faith. It's against what I believe in. I believe that we stand for as a nation. Besides, I lived in Europe for 10 years, and I really, really loved being able to drive from the Iberian Peninsula all the way to Poland without having to go through a checkpoint. Switzerland is the only checkpoint, and that was always a drag because we'd be stuck there for hours, and the cars, engines running, and the pollution, and then we'd have to somehow be sometimes subjected to being pulled over and searched. And did you know that during the Depression, California closed its borders because folks in Oklahoma who were victims of the Dust Bowl came looking for work, and California got too inundated, so it closed its border. But could you imagine driving from California to New York and having to be stopped at each state border? So I think open borders could be actually okay, and there are examples of them that work. So, and also all this talk about invasion at the border, like, I don't know what you consider an invasion, but I consider an invasion tanks and guys in uniforms with arms. But people at our border aren't showing up with arms. They're showing up with children in their arms and all that they own on their backs. They aren't invaders. So I don't really know what the government is talking about. It seems to me the real danger that's posed at the border is by the vigilantes and the multiple law enforcement arms that are charged with hunting these people down. Oh, sorry, lots of typos in there. I mean, the US border has become a militarized zone, don't you think? Like North Korea, but we're not a country at war unless we're at war with the poor and people in need of safety and compassion, which is all our human right. Sometimes it's like our government forgot about universal human rights, and I don't know about you, but that's just not right. And I sort of just kind of riff on the theme, and very often people will go, huh, can I buy your book and have a selfie? So it does work. In the long term, I don't know what kind of impact it might have, but it's just to start to get them to think a little differently. And I'll give you one more example, because it isn't just the other side, if for lack of a better word, that that falls prey to these positions, these positional arguments that don't move the needle. Even the movement does as well. And at the risk of offending anybody in the movement, end asylum is what the government wants to do. Save asylum is what the movement wants to do. But again, as I traveled the US, crisscrossing the nation, I discovered really quickly that most people, even people who were on the side of offering welcome, didn't really understand what asylum meant. So, the slogan underneath end asylum is keep them out with cruelty. And the slogan underneath save asylum is welcome them with dignity. But it's a head scratcher for some. If you don't know that you're talking about immigrants, then welcome with dignity really has no meaning. So I quickly came up with a new framing, where it was instead, and in response to ending asylum, my sort of comeback was, but their hope in finding a safe and dignified life knows no bounds, and our cruelty in the face of that hope is not okay. We're the USA. We're better than this. Criminalizing asylum is not the way. And that moved the needle. That's also why my slogan has become Hope Knows No Borders. Whereas, and then people would say, well, shoot, you're right. How do we fix it? And then I could say, well, we could start by saving asylum. oh, what's asylum? And then I would explain it. But starting out maybe with jargon is problematic here, and you end in a lose-lose positional argument. So that's just a couple of examples from me. And now I want to turn the floor over to Dora to give some examples of her learning and success. And I'll stop sharing the screen for the minute.
So for me, it's very interesting because we were trying to figure out how to have this conversation, and I can't wait until everybody has started sharing their own experiences and how we are approached, especially right now. So as Sarah and I were working in these topics and in this presentation, I had to call her one morning, to be exact, last week. On Wednesday morning, I took my grandkids for breakfast to a local McDonald's next to my house. And in that McDonald's, for the past years, I have noticed a lot of retirees, most of them white and a couple Black people, sitting in this table having discussion, political discussion, in a playground at McDonald's. So I was sitting with my grandchildren and I overheard this man saying, well, that criminal that is in El Salvador deserves to be in El Salvador because they're doing the right thing. And oh my gosh, my reaction was jump out of this table and shut him off. I had to compose myself. I had my grandkids in that playground, and I let him go for another minute. When he said, our president is doing the right thing. So it was my moment to stand up quietly, went right to that table, and say good morning to each of you. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Dora Rodriguez, and I am from El Salvador, and I am also a migrant. And can I tell you a little bit about the background, how I got here and where we are now? So I got that attention of that table immediately. But and then, of course, when I start saying about how we have suffered in my country not having dual process since the Civil War and where we are now with the new administration, um, they start heating up, of course. The man who wants to argue for their position, they start heating up. And it was interesting because that table was divided. It was some Democrats and it was some Republicans. So, for me, it was a moment of practice, nonviolence conversation, and I practice listening. I had to listen first what they were telling me so I can come back with something that it maybe open their heart, maybe open their mind. So I start saying, that my friends die because we were seeking a better life and especially safety from a war. They killed more than 75,000 people. And they looked at me and they go, oh, I'm so sorry for that. So, I think each of us are finding those moments anywhere, everywhere right now. So
Yeah.
it is very important for us to, I guess, continue to practice our nonverbal language, the nonviolence, the kind words, even if inside of us are like, because that's what I wanted it to do. But I knew that I wouldn't get anywhere. And I wanted it to leave the table with a message to these people that I hear you, but I don't have to agree with you.
I love that you brought up the active listening. That is super key too. And I'm really glad you added it because I forgot to put it in. But that's essential too. But you brought humanity to the conversation through yourself. Sometimes we can't bring our own, or we very often it is bringing our own stories, whether we were impacted or not, because we've had experiences with others impacted who we've encountered. So thank you for sharing that one, Dora. it sounds like it was successful in that it started a conversation and it turned the diamond and made people, it flashed a different facet in their eyes.
Right. I mean, at the moment you don't measure your success, right?
Right.
But you got out from that room alive, and you were able to share what you're passionate at and what are you fighting for. And maybe one of them went home and rethink what they were saying, or
Right.
so that is our hope.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier to plant the seed, and I think that's what each of us are doing. And I love to be in this space, and I know that each of us in this right now in this group are doing what we can to go on with what's presented to us, but it's we're all open to learn too, and thank you for that.
Another tactic is ridicule, but that sounds rather negative. But I used that fairly recently. When I was in the States, on my last tour trip, I was standing in line at a grocery store, and a very large man started speaking very, very rudely to a very small Hispanic woman and telling her to go back where she came from. Well, I happened to know that she was in the States for generations and she was a local pastor. And I'm sure she could have spoken up for herself, but I just turned to him and I said, "Your mother brought you up better than that. How dare you speak to her that way?" So maybe not as appropriate as, but a little bit of a slap doesn't hurt sometimes as well. Anyway, let's turn it over to you guys now. Does anybody have a success story they want to share? Or alternatively, a failure that they want to work on. Not failure, that's a bit of a strong word, but a moment when you wish you had been more successful.
I like to tell a story. I think it's very important to listen to stories.
Yes.
We have a group of my religious community, we call them mission partners, and they're lay people that have some relationship with our religious community. And every year they go to a different mission to do mission projects. And I was last year when they went to our mission in Holy Trinity, Alabama. And a big part of that for us at that point was to take them to a community to let the members of the parish there tell their stories. So we went to this parish, and there was about maybe 25 people in the parish, and they were all standing up in front of the altar with our priest, one of our priests that has been educated and ordained here in the United States, that does not have papers. But by the grace of the committee, he's still here. And they were so grateful for that. But anyway, all of the mission partners were listening to these stories about how they came to the United States and why they left their country, how they are trying to be invisible, be part of the country, all of that. And so just because of their stories and not because of some type of an education, just listen to their stories when we got back. And the people of this mission partners are far right to the far left and in between. So when we got back and we were debriefing in the chapel, one of the guys says, I'm a card-carrying Republican, and I have had my own ideas about who they are. I'm going to go back home now because I listened to the stories. I'm going to rethink what I feel and how I relate to those people. So, stories are important, I feel.
Stories are key. Stories are key. Absolutely. And then you can follow up with facts and charts and arguments and statistics, but that it's the humanity always that touches the heart and has the ability to change the mind. Thank you for sharing that, Father Ray. Do you have others?
I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. One of the good things that's come out of what's going on is that people are more aware of the subtleties and the nuances of people's individual situations.
Mhm.
Like they've deported all these people, but now people are understanding, they're calling them criminals, but now everyone's talking about, well, where's the evidence that this person is a criminal? And so people are learning about, you know, habeas corpus, or that people have rights, due process. And so that's because the Republicans seem to say that everybody, that anyone who's here, you're a criminal just by being here as an undocumented person.
Right.
Then they keep trying to criminalize being undocumented. You said that it's a misdemeanor, but there's been all these efforts, including Operation Streamline, to give people criminal records just for being undocumented in the United States. So when we're talking about this, it's really important that we clarify that it's not a crime to
Right.
be here, to be out of status, to be an undocumented person, despite the fact that they keep trying to make it a crime. Because every time you hear these people talking on Fox News, they're saying, well, they're criminals just by crossing the border, just by virtue of crossing the border, it makes them a criminal. So we really need to. And then there's all these levels of crimes that people have committed, like, well, he, is a shoplifter, or, or a traffic violation. There's all these things that they are saying makes these people criminals. So it's really important that we say, well, there's these levels of, I think we all agree that violent criminals should be stopped, that people need to be vetted. These are basic things we can agree on. But that blanketing, saying that everybody who is undocumented is a criminal makes I think that's something that we agree on with, whether we can get people to agree on that not everybody who is undocumented is a criminal. That's really important that we, clarify that use of language.
Absolutely, 100%. That's why I asked or suggested that folks read chapter 15, which is it's called Collateral Damage, and it's the story of Robert Vivar and how he fell prey to this spate of laws that began in 1988 under Reagan and then progressed into and throughout the Clinton administration, each one adding another bullet point or two or three or four to the definition of aggravated felony. It started with what you would expect: murder, arms trafficking, pedophilia, and then it just kept getting added to, until something like shoplifting or driving with a busted taillight became turned into aggravated felonies if you were a person of color without documents. And so this is the story of Robert Vivar, who admitted to falling prey to the opioid crisis, and he really, really wanted help. He got caught for shoplifting. He pled guilty, thinking that he would be sent to what do you call it? What do you call it when you get cleaned up?
Rehab.
There we go. And instead they stuck him in prison for 8 months, slapped a mandated detention until deportation on him, and then eventually deported him to the country he never knew, because he had come to the United States the right way with documents as a 6-year-old. So that was the story that I used to humanize this tragedy, really, of having a double standard and a double jeopardy for folks without citizens, without naturalization, and that can punish them not once, not twice, but 3 times. First, Robert did his time, then he was turned over ice, did more time, then he was deported for life. And you're absolutely right, Miriam, that they're leaning on the laws that were written in the 20s back when we had our last big eugenicist uproar. And when these laws, Section 1325 and 1326, criminalized or made illegal coming across the border without inspection. So yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors. So thank you for bringing that up. Who else would like to offer an example?
Can I say something a little optimistic first?
Please.
Okay, I've been a university professor for many years, but I teach courses in social justice education and arts activism. One of the first things that I do when we bring up, or I bring up this topic, is what you did, and I thank you very much for that, is I make sure that students understand the difference between refugees and asylum seekers. And I ask them, what does this mean to you first? I'll put it in a discussion session, and I'll ask them to define, have a definition for this first, so that I can kind of pick their brains to see where they're coming from. And I think that is the first step to understanding what is going on. And students, the young people that I work with, and I do teach remotely to a very conservative university, and even those conservative students know that this is wrong and that express it. So I have a very great deal of hope for young people. Now, having said that, I've been a member of Amnesty International for many, many years. So forced disappearances, undocumented, I mean, these have been on our dockets and campaigns and prisoners of conscience for years and years and years. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I live in Los Angeles now. And we worked with the Burke's kids. We worked with all of these important issues. We were paying for lawyers just to get people, asylum seekers, out of prisons, that were in prisons for 5 to 6 years because they could not afford a lawyer to speak on behalf of them. So this is a long-term issue. So thank you for your book. I do not know how to approach one type of person, and that is someone that has come from another country, that lives here, that has papers, and who says, no, Trump is right, we shouldn't let any more in. That
Right.
bothers me, and I never know how to respond to that. If you have any suggestions, anyone, please help me.
Yeah, that was a head scratcher at this election, wasn't it? That a lot of our immigrant brothers and sisters voted for this guy. And when I did a bit of interviewing, it's not scientifically, significant necessarily, but and I think Dora, you can speak to this too. More often than not, their answer was, I came the right way, I got in line, and I still don't have my papers. So they're jumping ahead of me. And there was resentment. And again, that is, I think it boils down to the authoritarian playbook of dividing those who should be united. So yeah, let me throw it out to the group. I don't necessarily have all the answers. Dora, do you have something to say on this one? This is a real important question.
Well, yeah, this is very personal. I mean, come on. So my first answer is, so you drink the Kool-Aid? Do you really believe that? When I have a one-on-one conversations with my own language, with my own people, with my own color, with my own country, and many of them have said, well, the economy, we came to this country to have the American dream, and we haven't accomplished that. So, they didn't do their homework. Many of these people did not do the homework. They just listen, they watch TV, because even the media, like we had two Hispanic channels in this country, Telemundo and Univision, they were also using those words, as an invasion, and that's all it was in people's brain. They would come to our borders and take film and film our families seeking asylum, large numbers. We cannot deny that. There were large numbers of people presenting in our borderlands, but in orderly manner in presenting, but they will see that on television. and they will tell me they're messing up Venezuelans' families against to their own. Cubans. Oh my God, I had a man who I helped in 2018, 2019 to get out from prison when he presented for asylum. But yes, he went to Florida. He became a resident because of the what the law says for Cubans, that they're here with parole with 1 year and then they can apply for residency. But the young man was for this situation, for this ugly older man. So it's just, for me, it's like, oh my gosh, how, we work through this. But again, I gone through all those examples. I gone through all those conversations with my own community, and many of them says, well, that's because you went through this and that. And yes, I came with that appointment, but it just doesn't matter, really, it doesn't matter. It shows that they believe the lies that were presented in their face in their small living rooms, and did not do the homework to really find the truth. So, yeah, stuff.
I think it dovetails too with a lot of the believers whose migration stories are now decades and generations old. And that is that we're always asking the wrong question, right? In our immigration space, in our policies, we tend to only ask, how do we stop them? How do we control the numbers? And we're not asking why are so many coming? And every nation group that shows up at the border, there's a story of horror back there. There's a story of crop failure or war or a state falling apart, and they're all coming for a reason. So I wonder if there's a way, or if any of you have experienced, harnessing that origin story as a way to bring humanity and lessen the resentment, and to say to those who still haven't made it through the line that it wasn't the newcomer's fault, it's the government's fault, and don't blame the newcomer. So who has some experience in that? Karen.
I've been trying something like that lately. For the last protest I went to, I created a shirt that said "immigrant once removed," because my mother was an immigrant, and it started a lot of conversations, obviously at that protest with a lot of like-minded people, but then other people who might not be as like-minded saw the shirt in pictures and then asked me about it. And in other conversations, in mixed groups of people, I've been very open in conversations saying why the part of the reason this issue is so important to me is it feels very personal. And that gets into a conversation about, well, yes, this is my family's immigration story. And that gives me an opportunity to say to them, like, what about your family? What's your family's story? When did your family come to this country? How many generations ago? Why did they leave where they were from originally? And to discuss the reasons that people leave. And that must have been so hard to leave everything behind and not know if you'd ever see your family and friends again, or if that must have been such a hard decision to make. And so I've been working on connecting with people on on that human level.
Yeah, I love that. I have had times too where, at a loss for anything else to say, I'll say to my interlocutor, well, where did your family come from? And what were the reasons for their movement? Did they run, or did they come, did they come seeking opportunity? And is it right that, getting into that, don't forget that you're an immigrant too, kind of narrative. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Deborah, did you see Nancy's comment in the
I was just going to respond to it and thank her for that. You know, I feel people, if people feel threatened in any way that what they have is going to be taken from them, this is another thing. It's very easy to buy into. And again, the constant repetition. I mean, you bring out so many good points. Constant repetition of all these sayings and slogans and everything else. And but if people in any way feel threatened that what I've worked so hard for is going to be taken away from me because this invader or intruder or alien is going to come in, it's a hard one. And going to Karen, I appreciate your story so much. My grandmother was a 14-year-old traveling by herself from Germany and came to this country and wound up because because my grandfather, who I never met, wound up in the coal mines and died. Well, the official death certificate said asthma, but it was, as we know now, black lung disease. And she raised 3 children on her own as a single parent. And I respect and admire her so much. It was so strange to hear her responses to people coming into this country because, again, it was happening that way too. She didn't quite understand why people were still being allowed in. And it was hard to see that because I admire her so much. All right, I admired her so much. So you know, it's a hard one. It's been going on for years, and it's a hard one. It's hard for me to tackle. I think at the next time I have one of my courses, I'm going to put it out to the students and see how they'll respond to it too.
Well, unless somebody wants to share another example, this might be a good opportunity to hop to a knots framing, because maybe that will provide some answers, Deborah. Does anybody else want to offer an example, or can I hop to that point in the talk? Up to you. Okay, that sounds like a yes.
Hop, hop,
Go ahead.
hop, hop. Yes.
Yeah, hop, hop. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, and let me make sure I get the right. There it is. So what we've talked about, call it what it is, right? Always center the human stories. Let me get this. I'm having trouble with my Zoom today. There we go. So call it what it is. Use the language that speaks the truth. Always center humanity. The stories are what touches hearts and minds. They hold the power. And then name the villain. So it sounds like in this situation, maybe, Deborah, folks are misplacing who the villains are because of the sloganeering. And this is what Anat brings to the table. She has this template that she calls the values villains vision narrative. She throws victories in there too sometimes. And we can play with it. But it basically, I'm just going to riff here for a minute, but trying to bounce off what you were talking about, that, you know, just for example, I am going to riff, this might be inelegant, but my family fled whatever it was and came to the United States in search of an opportunity to provide for our families. And then that's where they might slip into, you know, the villain of the immigrant who's coming behind them, right? But the real villain here is the government that's distracting them with one hand and picking their pockets with the other. Or there must be a better way of capturing this narrative, and I invite you to try. But we all come with this sense of an American dream, only to find that the price of eggs doesn't fall, and there's competition for too few jobs, and like name the villains, and then provide the vision behind it, as a way to reframe and provide and create this narrative that wins. It was that narrative that I really used to build my stories in Crossing Lines. So, for example, going back um, to Robert's story, there's a section in there about the gangs, and there were, Doras, right? This was the story of Salvadoran youth that fled a war that the United States created, and it's a cautionary tale because those young people should have and could have been offered welcome, been provided schooling, so that they could get educated and become self-sufficient and pursue a vision of prosperity for themselves and their families. But instead, they were not offered welcome. They were marginalized in dangerous neighborhoods, and the they bonded through belonging, and cliques became gangs, and fists turned into machetes, and violent, petty crime led to prison time, and they graduated as MS-13 and Barrio 18. And then what did our country do? Shipped them back to a country that had just been decimated by a 12-year war that they didn't necessarily want. And now we have a gang problem, right? And the CCOT prison that was built as a result of that. So it's finding that, human value of what we all share, and then naming the true villain. And in this case, the true villain is not the other immigrant. The true villain is the government that hasn't fixed the problem, or the social pathologies that only get responded to through law and order and not through sort of mental health or education or what have you. And then, following that up with, wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a country where, education, the Congress appropriated money for education and not for border militarization, for example. So I'll just throw that out there, and I'll stop sharing my screen again, and I'd love to hear how you react.
Yeah, I think naming the villain is important. And these days when I encounter people, just listen. I mean, I know they have opposing views. I know that if I name the villain, they have such adoration for the villain that it is hard to break through that. So I listen. And I try to do kind of what you did, like I try to tell some type of story. I sometimes talk about my students, that way too, oh, well, yeah, I was just discussing this with a student and they said something really interesting, or, I'll deflect it so that it's not, doesn't become combative. So it's the best I could do right now. But yeah, naming the villain is important if you can do it without someone becoming angry, which has happened to me quite a number of times.
Right. That's avoiding the you messages is often helpful, not always, but you don't want somebody to feel like they're being villainized, right?
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. Anybody else want to react to that template? Father Ray, you have the floor.
There's something that not been mentioned, but I think that part of this American dream thing, they want to assimilate into that. And what that is consumerism and materialism,
Oh,
where I've spent almost 20 years in Mexico, and very poor little town outside of Mexico City, but just to see a Christmas where the value is the family together. And it's maybe they might get, and their presents is a piece of candy or whatever. But the value is the family together, that humanness amongst them. Here in the States, it's not that. It's
yeah.
how much do you have? Or I'm better than you because I have more than you.
Yeah.
And that whole sense of competition, where I didn't, at least in that town where I lived in Mexico, it was not that. And so in a way I can understand not being, I understand if they buy into that dream, that consumerism, materialism, competition, where my worth is what I have,
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
have more than you. And one of the examples I have is here in the States, they have robbed Christmas, because Christmas here in the United States, and this is all over in the United States, is if the stores sold more this year than last year, it's a good Christmas. And so I
Right.
think at least a lot of the Hispanic people of those countries where it's human, and it's that humanist, that relationship. And here it's something totally different. And if they really buy into that, um, I can, in a sense, understand why they say they bought into the American dream, and the American dream is not so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to do a values villain vision statement around that, that kind of pokes the hole in the American dream. Because you're right, it's a trope. It's a lie for a lot of people, including us, more privileged folks. All right, any other examples or burning comments? Marie, did you want to say something?
Well, I really appreciate the proactive approach to the discussion. It's helping me a lot.
Oh,
Be,
good.
because at this time I am not feeling very hopeful. And I hear what you're saying, Father Ray, about the American dream. I've heard other people speak about that as well. Alvaro Enciso has a great uh, dialogue about, he's the man who builds the crosses uh, at the border for the deceased that are found in the desert. Some of them found by James Holman, who was mentioned earlier. Anyways, so the American dream to me at this moment in my life, and for some of my colleagues that I'm working with locally, the American dream has been dashed because the loss of respect for our democracy and our Constitution.
Mm.
And I know that it's very intense and very heavy. It's not exactly the thread of this, and but the dialogue has helped me to reframe my approach in some ways. But the American dream for me has been dashed asunder
Sure.
at this point, and I'm deeply grieving that. At the same time, trying to mobilize and okay, let's make sure that we can thwart this and turn this this speeding train around before it destroys too much more. So and in a sense, I'm trying to get back to an American dream of the rule of law and democracy and upholding our Constitution, which really has held this country together for a couple hundred years. It isn't great, it isn't perfect, but I certainly appreciate all the freedoms and the privilege that I have as an American. And so, I guess that's what I want to say. I don't really have any conclusive words of wisdom. I'm just sharing my sense of deep grief and frustration at this time. But the dialogue from all of you has been very uplifting. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's good to hear. And I appreciate and share your grief. I mean, it does feel like it's not just the American dream that's dying, but the civilization and democracy as we know it. So there is this value that we all grew up with and potentially believed our nation to be, and the villains are tearing that down right now and turning that around to vision. Wouldn't I appreciate being in community with all of y'all and hope that we can continue to grow this community as a way to reclaim what we are right now losing, and to do it together, because the only way through this is together. So, Barbara.
Yes, thank you. Several comments, I guess, but I go all the way back to Miriam when she talked about, I lost what she talked about, but it reminded me of the thing that gives me hope right now. And this is just recently, but the growth of alternative media. The media, for me, people used to always complain about it's the fault of the media. And it took me a while to wake up to that. Even to the point where watching PBS got me really angry.
Sign the button. Meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the growth of Substack and all of those great writers has really educated people about the truth of such things as we've been talking about. What is a criminal? Is an asylum seeker a criminal, etc.? These words that have been used. One of the ones that really bugs me is when they talk about concertina wire, which is a nice, pretty little musical instrument, but it's razors. I've seen some really terrible lacerations on migrants from those razor wires. But the growth of alternative media, I think, is helping to educate people, and that is where my hope lies at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we'll just do a little call out to my own Substack. I put the link in the notes there, and that is where I will share whatever recording comes from this conversation. But also we have a great an editor of a great alternative press right here in the room. I'll introduce Bob. Would you like to tell us about your paper, Bob?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, the People's Tribune is essentially dedicated to providing a platform for the people in the country who have the least and who are struggling, and people who are suffering all kinds of oppression, including immigrants. And we also have a bilingual sister publication, English and Spanish, the Tribunal del Pueblo. And you can find us on the web. And periodically we do a print publication, but not very often. And we're certainly open to getting people's stories from around the country. That's kind of our specialty, is publishing things that the people themselves write about the struggles going on in their communities. So if you've got something going on that you want us to publicize, just get a hold of us. You can find us online at peoplestribune.org and reach us at peoplestribune@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, and thanks for that invitation. You might be hearing from me. And
Okay. Thank you.
And Marie, you have a radio show. Do you want to tell us about that?
I do. I'm just small potatoes in the media world. It's local community radio out of Silver City, Gila Members Community Radio, and I've been doing community radio for years, and focusing on border and immigration issues and social justice issues in general. So I like to have interviews with people to discuss what they're working on, what the concerns are. And if you're interested in that, I can put my email in the chat. You can reach out if you want to have a phone interview to talk about what you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Are there any other journalists and writers, podcasters in the room? If not, we have 2 minutes left, and I'd love to hear if anybody has a burning issue or topic that they'd like to discuss for the next time. And I'd like to give the floor back to Dora to close us out.
Well, so if it's anyone else, I know that we're going to leave this space today with a lot that we have learned from you. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the efforts that were put into this amazing space and workshop. Hope we continue to do this every last Sunday of the month. I look forward. It's wonderful. So just a few things that I wrote. It says, what give us hope? Well, I think we continue to have hope in our communities, with each other. And we have to remember what we're fighting for. We have to remember what we believe is the truth, and not allow anyone to invade our minds of giving us the false narrative and the false words, because it's really attacking the fabric of our Constitution and our freedom in this country. So I know that each of us are going to find those spaces, the right words, the right moments, and fight against this. And it's I am so hopeful to see so much gathering in our communities, the protests that are going, even in the most rural areas. There is only 25 people with the sign, but it's lifted because of social media. So somebody's putting out these 25 people way in the heck out there in some little town in Montana. So I think we need to continue to do all that. And then the way that we are good, whatever our space is. And I tell the young students, I said, if your space is to go into the food bank and help that migrant, the person that is at home fearful because she cannot go and get a food box, well, you can do it for her. You can do it so she can feed her children. Anything, writers write about this, artists create art about this. I mean, let's take it as an opportunity to continue in action. So thank you so much.
And I just want to point out that Dora gave us the perfect values, villains, vision statement, and added a little victory in there too. So thank you, Dora, my sister de alma, and all of you for coming. I mean, that's what I say about my book. I hope that when people read it, there's 100 different voices in there, including Dora's, and everybody doing something a little different. So be cognizant of the one example that makes your heart beat a little faster and choose to do just that. Because if each of us in our own small way are contributing to the vision that Dora just expressed, then we can be like the million grains of sand that will thwart this machinery of destruction until it's finally behind us. And when these dark days are done, we will be ready and equipped and in community to rebuild something beautiful out of the ashes. So thank you so much for coming. And please be in touch if you have any burning issues you want us to tackle for the next time around. Let me know a couple weeks out so I can put together the panel, so that Dora and I can put together the panel. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here. Love y'all. Let me turn off the recording and figure out how to do that.
Barb, it's so good to see you. Oh, she's gone.
Why can't I figure out how? Oh, there it is. Stop.
And I see Susan from Tucson, Frank from far away.
Idaho, I think she said.
Yeah, she signed out. It was great.
Oh, I love you, my dear.
Me too. Thank you from thousands miles away. Thank
Thank
you for all
you.
that you do.
It's so it gets hard to be so far away. It's so hard to be so far away. But
But this is beautiful.
this kind of thing, you know, it keeps me going, and it
Yes.
gives me hope, and it keeps me connected to you. So
Yes.
let's keep it going. I'm so grateful to be in this journey with you.
Thank you. I hope you have a good night's sleep tonight. You're about to go to bed.
Yeah,
Thank you.
look, the sun set while we were chatting.
That's right. I don't know if Susan and Fran are on. I think they're disconnected. But yeah, let's stay in touch.
Okay, if you have any ideas for next time, let me know, and I'll do the same with you. I'll send you some ideas on Signal.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for all the hard work you put into it. Oh, I could never do it.
Thank you for all your hard work. We're a good team.
All right. Father Ray and I are about to go and deliver food to our 70-year-old friend.
Oh,
Who's
wow.
been here 50 years. She's been here with no documents.
Oh my
Now
God.
she's 58 and alone, and no one wants to help her because she has no social security.
Oh
So
my goodness me.
yeah, we're
All right, well,
delivering food.
let me know if I can help. If you need some
Yeah,
cash, I'll send it over.
thank you. We'll
And
see ya.
would you mind just gifting one of my books to Father Ray?
Thank you for reminding me, because I'm gonna see him right now.
Okay, tell him I'll
Thank
sign
you.
it when I'm next in Tucson.
And then I have 3 left.
Okay, sounds good.
After him. Okay, love you.
Love you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.